What's up, YouTube? This video is about mech building fundamentals in a speedrun. The quick and dirty of it is you want obviously firepower, then energy, then speed. Here are my mechs for a run. Be sure to pause to look at them. They are essentially the most optimal for my current strats. Now, this is not current patch. As you can see, this is 1.02.1. Current patch is a dead patch for the speed run, way slower, and I foresee it getting even slower. So although these fundamentals still apply, you will most likely have to explore different avenues to get similar results. In fact, 1.05 patched a few days ago and it nerfed our single thruster significantly. Now, I don't do PvP, so unsure what logistics to go through, but this is specifically for speedrunning the game. All these numbers seem really intimidating, but we only really care about 3 stats. Using a regular generator like Santai, basically they're either going to be yellow or blue thruster colors. You want at least 3600 EN output. You want at least 4000 to 4400 EN capacity and as high efficiency as possible. The recharge delay is usually around 0.8 to 2 seconds. You don't want to go above 2 seconds. It's just slower for some strats. If you're using the NGI Coral generator like I am, you don't really care about efficiency. You can see it at 2900, that's pretty low. It's a nice to have, but you care more about the recharge delay due to needing to deplete more. That makes NGI viable, and playing around this delay is very important and makes NGI not lose time to Santai if you strat around it. This is the lowest we could possibly make the recharge delay, and it barely works. Nothing else really takes into account for the speedrun, no other stats. We don't really care about the AP since ideally we don't really get hit that often, or we could usually survive on the 3 medkits. If you're having issues with staying alive or finishing fights quickly, you opt for more firepower and heavier parts for more stability. Basically, the heavier you are, the easier the run is to stay alive. Now, to get into the specifics of what parts are usable for the run, here they are. You will be using 1 head. This is the lightest one, and you don't really need anything else because all they give is AP and scan benefits, which don't matter. Cores, you have 4 to pick from. Notch is the lightest and used almost specifically for NGI. Ephemera is the heaviest, and if you use Santai, it's arguably required because Santai is not that great a generator without Ephemera. Farmiza or the Orbiter chests are good alternative to Ephemera, but you want to avoid using them if you can use the other 2. Arms is pretty simple. If you have 2 choices. If you have a melee weapon, you want Bashos on, period. It gives you the most melee specialization. It pumps our damage up pretty high. If you don't have a melee, you can pretty much use whatever arms you want, but I would default to Jailbreak as being arm overloaded or whatever. It doesn't really affect the aim that much. You care more about the weight for these and these specializations. Firearm specialization specifically doesn't really increase damage or anything. It just aims better. For the legs, you have the choice of Farmiza or Ephemera. Realistically, you can make any of the other ones work if you wanted, but these are the best legs for the firepower we found to be usable. If you get even heavier, the VP 422 is really the only legs I consider using, but these legs are pretty heavy. You have a single thruster that you want to use. This gives you the highest AB thrust speed in the game, period. This is the only thrusters you're going to use. Generators, again, you want to use Santai if you aren't using NGI. NGI is arguably the most optimal generator as it provides you everything you need in the run and a bit more damage on assault armor, a unique trait of Coral generators, and a reasonable amount of plasma firearm, but this generator is harder to use. Now, you want to use the 20C generator for specifically energy firearm specialization. For the FCS, the P05 is the best general use one. You use this one for missile correction for a Carmen line, and you use this one for missile lock on speed for chapter 1. Now, before we go into the viable weapons to use, be sure to like and subscribe if this is helping you, trying to grow a channel and create a community, so it really helps me out. Now, for weapons, realistically, there's only 2 melee weapons worth using, which is the pile and the chainsaw. The only time you want to use chainsaw, though, is in a dual melee setup for, say, cataphract if you want it. The slicer is also an option, but it is fairly slow on the way it does its damage, so it's essentially a worse chainsaw, but nothing else really matters. For your hand weapons, Zimmerman is probably the best weapon for basically all cases. Dual Zims are extremely versatile, and only 16s really compete with it for damage, and only in a dual melee setup. Otherwise, you will most likely only ever use Zimmermans outside of esoteric situations, like where we use these flamethrowers for Juggernaut. Shoulder weapons, generally you have the choice of needles, which is roughly an equal in speed to the 60 LCDs. The 60 LCS are viable and used in NG runs, but for NG plus runs, they are usually lacking but usable. Missiles are good for ad clearing, but only really these hand missiles or these 6x shoulder missiles, but these aren't really used as much either now. I think it's gonna be maybe just a true ending. Plasma launchers are also really good and used for ad clearing, as they can bypass physical shields. This is the Fasan, which is on my dual Zim mech. It has very strong damage, and on paper does a little bit more damage and is lighter than the 60 LCDs. The Kreninch is a viable alternative to the Fasan for the fast mech, but I generally prefer the Fasan as it enables my fast mech to be used in more situations. Now, these Coral launchers specifically are an exception in this list, and only really viable in 1.01 due to a Coral glitch. I won't get into them as we are still working stuff out for it, but there is a glitch to make them do essentially 4x damage and reach the realm of one-shots for bosses, but adds so much volatility to the run. I don't personally use them, but they are in fact viable. But basically anything else, the Seekers, the vertical missiles, other plasma weapons, explosives, core weapons, all that stuff will almost always be lacking, but they are in fact usable if you wanted to use them. You can find uses for stuff like the Huxley and stuff like these if you wanted, but I found you could almost find a strat to use any of the better viable weapons in the same speed, if not better. But don't let me stop you from experimenting with these other weapons. In fact, the Earshot might actually be a viable weapon. We haven't tested or found much of a situation to use these yet, but stuff like the flamethrower, only recently did we found out that it shreds the Juggernaut. So try out different weapons, see what you like. Now that you understand what weapons we can use and should use with what mech parts, mech building is about the best mech for the mission you want to use it for. Logistics of that include time to swap for the missions, which is roughly 3 seconds per swap, and how heavy the mech is, and how many EN bars the mech uses in the mission. It is a bit complicated because it kind of is. A lot of little things need to be taken into account since these mechs spans multiple missions. This is extremely important, as a lighter mech with better EN management will net you lower mission times than obviously a heavier mech. There is some leeway in this, however, to build the mech you want. Currently, my mech can fly Purge with no weapons at 592 speed. The speed cap in this game is about 604 to 606. It fluctuates during flight. This mech is essentially the lowest you can go without going into IL strats. However, if you have a quick mission that really only uses 3 EN bars to complete, and or within the 3 EN bars, you end up at a door or a load of some sort. A mech with almost 30 speed lower will have comparable times still, allowing you to have more variety in the mechs you want to build. Now, for example, Grid 86, I'll have it playing in the background. All you really have to pay attention to is how close they are. There are multiple parts in this mission specifically where you don't really use more than 3 EN bars, and you have a reload checkpoint in the middle and a depot before the boss that doesn't lose time as you're waiting for the door to open. In this mission, you can have a reasonably heavier mech as low as, say, a 565 speed versus a 592 speed mech, as long as that mech can reach the same points with the same EN bar amounts. Whatever the marginal loss in time from the speed difference is made up by the faster kill time in the boss. In this scenario, you are essentially equal if you don't swap mechs. Swapping mechs costs roughly 3 seconds on average every time, so the rule of thumb is to use the same mech for at least 2 missions to make the swap worthwhile, as the time saved from using that mech will essentially negate the swap time loss. One other thing is that reload checkpoint costs roughly 2 seconds in most cases to use if you're not waiting. So you want to use only 1 reload per mission if you can, and try not to create overburden mechs on most occasions if you need all 4 weapons at some point. That's it for the guide. It will take quite a bit of trial and error to get the mechs you want and create strats around it. I'm going to leave the comparison going so you can get a feel for the difference in speed and firepower. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Be sure to join my Discord, and peace out.
Very smart cookie, aren't you? Interesting. All right, tourist. That's enough. You've made your point. I surrender. Just not worth the losses. Come on, I'll let you through. Up along now.
Let's see what she has up her sleeve.